From the outside looking in, Andy Gibb, the little brother of pop music superstars the Bee Gees, appeared to have it all. A promising career.
You had the ultimate teen idol. The long blonde hair with the tan skin, with shirt open to the waist, the hairy chest, the works.
Unprecedented milestones.
He was the first solo artist to have his first 3 singles go to #1 in Billboard. I mean, you can't ask for better than that.
Beautiful women.
There was nothing for me not to adore. It would have been amazing for me not to fall in love with him.
But underneath Andy Gibb's fame and fortune were insecurities and addictions.
I turned to drugs for a month. I did quite an awful lot of cocaine.
Andy Gibb was virtually born into pop music stardom, but in spite of his achievements, he was always haunted by his tortured soul.
Nothing to lose.
Leads you to where you are today.
I believe in storytelling.
It's gonna make you a star.
I'm still trying to figure that out.
1977. Big hair, mirror balls, the age of disco. Saturday Night Fever, the movie, was a huge phenomenon. Its soundtrack, written and produced by the Bee Gees, defined the music of the era.
Saturday Night Fever sold 25 million copies worldwide, and it was 24 weeks #1 on the American chart.
The Bee Gees stood for the brothers Gibb, Barry, Robin, and Maurice. But there was a fourth brother, and he was breaking out in his own right. In 1977, at age 19, Andy Gibb's debut album, Flowing Rivers, sold over 1 million copies. The lead single of the album, I Just Want to Be Your Everything, went on to be the most played song of 1977. Andy was suddenly a top pop heartthrob. Magazines gushed over him, and teen girls plastered his posters on their walls. But Andy had a tough time accepting his great fortunes. He questioned whether he was famous on his own merits or from riding the coattails of his brothers.
I remember talking to Andy about what he saw when he looked himself in the mirror. I said to him, Andy, you have great looks. Women love you. Guys adore you. You've got all this talent. You have had such great success. I always felt that Andy just never saw anything in the mirror. He saw an empty vision. And no matter how many times you told him, he just would still see nothing.
It was just something inside of him that didn't realize how fabulous and talented he really was.
On March 5, 1958, in Manchester, England, Andy Gibb was born into a musical family. Andy's father, Hugh, was a band leader and drummer, and his mother, Barbara, had performed as a big band singer. The Gibbs' oldest sons, Barry, and fraternal twins, Robin and Maurice, inherited their parents' love of music as well.
While they were living at Capel Road, the kids were told to turn the radio down, but of course it wasn't the radio, like it was the kids themselves singing. And that was when sort of the parents spotted the talent.
When Barry was 9 and the twins, Maurice and Robin, were 6, they formed a band called the Rattlesnakes and found a movie theater to host their first performance. The Gibb brothers planned to start out by lip-syncing to a record, but fate would prove otherwise.
It was just after Christmas in 1957. They took a 78 RPM record, very fragile, trooped off just around the block to the Gaumont Cinema, and just as they were about to cross the roads, one of them dropped it. They had to perform for real. That was the first public performance by the Bee Gees.
Barbara and Hugh corralled their resources to support the Bee Gees' pursuit of a musical career. In 1963, the group landed their first record deal, and by 1966, they enjoyed their first major hit, Spicks and Specks. The Bee Gees made a lasting impression on their youngest brother, Andy. Andy would watch his brothers perform from backstage, marveling at what he saw. Andy dreamed of being a performer too.
When you're young, I think you've got your role models and your heroes and your idols. Andy seemed to have all of these elements in one convenient package, and they all lived under the same roof. Your brothers, the Bee Gees.
And it was his older brother, Barry, who encouraged Andy's love of music. Barry bought Andy his first guitar at age 9.
He was going to be a musician, absolutely. There was nothing else he was going to do. He lived and breathed singing, playing his guitar.
Andy also enjoyed the affluent life that the Bee Gees' success provided. While living on the Isle of Man, a Rolls-Royce picked him up from school, and he got to travel the world to watch his brother's concerts.
As a youngster living in the Isle of Man, though he wasn't licensed, he had a sports car. And at 16 years of age was racing around the island. He just had this wonderful joy of living.
At age 15, with his family's blessing, Andy put everything on the line when he quit school to pursue a career in music. He hoped to break into the business by joining his brother's group.
From the age of about 13 or 14, I think his ambition was to become the fourth Bee Gee. It was Barbara that started it, saying, look, get your own band. And I think it began early in the 70s when one of the local music shops started to recruit band members for Andy.
In February 1974, at age 16, Andy formed his own band called Melody Fair. The name was taken from a Bee Gees song.
Melody Fair, that was the name Barbara, Andy's mother. It was a bit girly, but...
The band members wondered if Andy's privileged lifestyle would make him difficult to work with. They were pleased to discover the opposite was true.
He was a lot of fun. He was very energetic. Everything he did, he was 110% into it. And if you straggled behind, then you got left behind, you know, because he was that sort of a person. It was easy to buy into what he was doing.
Despite being just 16, Andy understood early on some of the industry pitfalls. Andy imposed strict rules upon the band. No drinking or drugs were tolerated before or after performances.
We were at a party, just an ordinary party, and this guy who was a bit out of it asked Andy to roll a joint for him, and I don't think Andy knew how to roll a joint, so he had a go at this, and he was making a right mess of it, and in the end he just threw it in the air and said, I can't do that, and the guy wasn't best pleased, really.
The Gibb family felt Andy had the talents to make it big like the Bee Gees. Barry took a special interest in Andy's growth as an artist. He and Andy shared a very unique and close bond.
Barry once said to me, his parents had two sets of twins, except there were 12 years separating him and Andy, because he was virtually twinned with Andy, where Morris and Robin, they were, you know, twins.
He talked a lot about Barry. Barry was his idol. To me, he was just a younger version of Barry.
Barry wanted to make sure Melody Fair's performances came off as polished and professional.
He said, you know, you're going to have a proper order so you all know what you're playing. He actually helped us put the list together and he actually wrote it out, and I've still got a copy of that. And at the very end it says, get off. They were good performances. It just worked. We seemed to gel together as a band, and the crowds liked it. We were full every night and we got applause for every song. We got encores. It went really well.
Melody Fair quickly exhausted its opportunities on the Isle of Man. In 1975, Barbara decided to take the band to Australia, where the Bee Gees had enjoyed success in the 1960s.
She said, I really think going to Australia would be the best idea, because the Bee Gees were still very famous down there.
Andy and his bandmates thought superstardom was right around the corner for them. But the fate of Melody Fair would take an unexpected turn. In 1974, 16-year-old Andy Gibb moved to Australia to follow in the footsteps of his famous brothers, the Bee Gees. Andy's band, Melody Fair, felt superstardom was right around the corner when they headed to the studio to record their first single.
We made a single called To a Girl, and Morris came in and played keyboard on it, and the only reason they wouldn't release the single was because it was about 6-7 minutes long. A bit of a shame, because it really was a good song.
While in Australia, Andy drew a lot of attention, being the younger brother of the Bee Gees. He was in constant demand for TV talk shows and other guest appearances.
The trouble for us was that Andy, of course, was a celebrity, so he was getting called to Melbourne to do TV shows like quiz shows. So a lot of the time our work slowed down because Andy wasn't available to rehearse, record. We asked Barbara, where are we going? How long is this going to take? And she said, be patient, it'll happen soon. But John and I had savings, and only so much savings, and we basically decided, him and me, that we weren't going anywhere as quickly as we'd like to.
They had no choice but to tell Andy they were leaving the band.
Bad news was a thing Andy didn't have at all. Maybe for 2 or 3 seconds it would affect him, and then he'd just carry on again.
The breakup of Melody Fair was only a temporary setback for Andy. He formed a new band called Zenta and signed with the record label ATA. His career was being watched from afar by one of music's most successful moguls, Robert Stigwood, the man behind the success of the Bee Gees.
Andy needed to work his way in and not just go on the coattails of his brothers, which he didn't want either. So the best thing would be to form a band, go out on the road for 20 quid a night and learn the hard way.
Andy wanted to prove that he was worthy of a contract with Stigwood. He displayed his talents by writing the song Words and Music, which became a hit on the Australian charts. With the release of his new single, life began to change rapidly for Andy. In the fall of 1975, he met Kim Reeder at a dog show. For Andy, it was love at first sight.
It was a simple courtship, what sort of two teenagers do simple things that they enjoy doing. They're going out, walks, fishing, dog shows, whatever.
The romance between Andy and Kim was growing quite serious when in June of 1976, Andy got an urgent call from brother Barry. Robert Stigwood liked what he heard in the single Words and Music, and he felt Andy was ready to make the jump to America for a big-time recording session. Andy was forced to make a decision about the fate of his relationship with Kim.
Andy just kind of rushed into it and said, right, let's get married, you're coming out of the States to live with me.
At age 18, and after dating her for less than a year, Andy Gibb asked for Kim's hand in marriage. Kim accepted, and just 2 weeks later, they wed on July 11, 1976. After the wedding, Andy dismantled his band Zenta, negotiated out of his deal with ATA, and moved to Miami, Florida, with Kim to record the new album. Andy had the luxury of teaming up with his brother Barry, who had written hit songs for the Bee Gees and other artists.
Barry Gibb is absolutely one of the great songwriters of all time. He's up there with Lennon and McCartney.
Barry enthusiastically produced Andy's recording session, penning Andy's first 2 singles. The album, Flowing Rivers, was released in 1977. In a flash, Andy achieved his dream of becoming a star. Flowing Rivers enjoyed great success. The album's first 2 singles, I Just Want to Be Your Everything and Love is Thicker Than Water, went to #1 on the charts.
But he had a charisma on stage. Something shone out of Andy. When you saw the video footage of him on TV shows, he had a stage presence. It was just a natural thing.
Andy was the type of person that he had a charm, no matter if it was one-on-one or in front of 20,000 people at a venue. And when he performed, he commanded that audience. He had them in the palm of his hand,
Andy was also a standout talent when he collaborated with other artists.
We were in Munich, Germany, and we met Freddie Mercury. We were in the studio one night, and Freddie Mercury couldn't hit a high note, and he told Andy, "Get out there. That's your family's forte, the high notes." So Andy went and sang on with Queen backtracks, and it just sounded so incredible.
As quickly as he became an overnight sensation, Andy's initial confidence evaporated. He began to battle bouts of insecurity, questioning the legitimacy of his newfound success.
So much of his success, he felt, maybe had to do with Barry's help and his brother's help. On some level, internally, he thought that maybe it wasn't as much about him as it was about the fact that his brothers had influenced his success. But truly, he wouldn't have had this success with the songs if he didn't have the personality, if he didn't have the voice.
I think the success worked against him, having it so early.
Andy was on his way towards pop music stardom, but his growing insecurities and addictive personality would lead him down a dangerous path. In 1977, 19-year-old Andy Gibb appeared to be an unstoppable hit machine, on his way to enjoying a career with no limits. But somewhere within, despite his success, Andy developed serious doubts. Were his hit records the result of his own talent? Or was his success due to the songs his brother Barry wrote and produced for him?
Andy did have an insecurity. I think he may have felt that he was in the shadow of his brothers, and maybe specifically Barry, though he loved Barry very much.
I believe I owe it chiefly to my brothers who produced my records. My brother Barry, who helps me, you know, if I have trouble writing any song, he always put me in the right direction. Yeah. And he's always steered my career, so I really, they're to blame.
Andy settled in Hollywood with his new wife, Kim. It was the first time he had lived far beyond the watchful eye of his family. Andy had always been a straight-laced kid who never dabbled in drugs, but along with his newfound celebrity came a whole array of temptations.
Andy was quite easily led, I think, and going over to LA and getting into the wrong kind of company, doing all the showbiz parties and stuff along those lines. And I think it's inevitable that somebody would probably be tempted to experiment. You like what you experience. If you have an addictive personality, I suppose it is really quite easy to get hooked.
Kim watched Andy transform into a man she no longer recognized. Andy became argumentative. He went through mood swings. Kim soon discovered Andy had a cocaine problem and pleaded with him to change his ways.
It's obviously difficult living with somebody that is experimenting with substances, and it's going to make things very, very difficult when you're living in a domestic environment with them. What was making the situation worse was that Andy was spending more and more time away from the marital home.
In the spring of 1977, Kim discovered she was pregnant. She refused to raise a child with Andy while he was abusing drugs. She moved back home to Australia for the remainder of her pregnancy. Still, Andy promised to be present for the birth of their baby. But when Peta Gibb was born on January 25, 1978, Andy was nowhere to be found. Kim and Andy divorced shortly after the birth. Despite Andy's personal battles, his meteoric rise in popularity continued. In 1978, he released Shadow Dancing, and the album was an instant hit.
Andy's second album, Shadow Dancing, contained the single of the same name, which was his third consecutive US chart topper.
He was the first solo artist to have his first 3 singles go to #1 in Billboard. I mean, you can't ask for better than that.
Andy was just such a marketable commodity at that time. He had his own fan club, he had all sorts of merchandise produced. You could even go out and buy Andy Gibb bubble gum, which had a fold-out poster or collector's cards, jigsaws, you had plastic guitars, you even had an Andy Gibb disco dancing doll.
While Andy was approaching superstar status and selling millions of records, he did his best to hide his drug problems. He kept his habit a secret from his family and friends, but in 1979, during the recording of his third album, After Dark, Andy's drug use began to catch up with him.
Between the Shadow Dancing album in '78 and After Dark in 1980, there seemed to be this void which was 1979. There was obviously something going on there. There was obviously some abuse going on there.
Andy habitually missed recording sessions. His voice was weakened as a result of cocaine abuse.
As one of the producers of Andy's albums, Albie Galutin, said, there are certain studio tricks that you can use to tidy up somebody's performance. If, for instance, the pitch isn't quite right, you can tweak that. If the meter, the length of the note that somebody is singing isn't quite right, you can extend or shorten that. But what you can't use your studio tricks to change is the timbre, the actual sound and quality of somebody's voice and the emotion that they are actually putting into what they are saying. And this is where Andy's voice started to decline during that period. So consequently, a lot of what you're hearing on the After Dark album is Barry.
By now, Robert Stigwood realized Andy had a drug problem. He desperately tried to help.
So you try to protect them. You try to protect their finances so they can't have access to so much money they can just throw it away. You're trying to help them, but you then become the enemy. And you lose that sympathy that you shared.
Sales for Andy's third album, After Dark, didn't fare as well as the previous two. Andy faced personal issues as well. His daughter Peta was close to turning 2 years old, and he still had never met her. Kim wanted Peta and Andy to have a relationship. She flew to America with Peta in January 1980 so the two could finally meet.
Peta, from that meeting, says that she has one memory of it, and that is of Andy giving her a drink of Coca-Cola. From there on in, he used to speak to her on the phone, but that was pretty much the only contact that they had.
Andy's meeting with Peta would be the last time he would ever see her. Any chance of Andy and Kim reconciling the relationship was finished, as a new woman would soon step into Andy's life. After his divorce from Kim Reeder in 1978, Andy Gibb was considered one of the hottest eligible heartthrobs in Hollywood. He courted many of the most sought-after celebrities of the day, including Susan George and Marie Osmond.
Yeah, and Andy never had any problem with women at all, but he was more of the type of guy that what liked a relationship and not a lot of dating and all that. He wanted to settle down.
Andy found his next love in a totally surprising way while appearing on The John Davidson Show.
Andy Gibb was making an appearance on The John Davidson Show on 6th of January 1981, and the researchers on that show had come across an interview that he'd done with the magazine in the past, where Andy mentioned his two dream girls. One of them was Bo Derek, and the other was Victoria Principal, who was in the incredibly successful TV series Dallas at the time. Victoria was booked into the studio opposite doing The Tonight Show. So the topic of Andy's favourite ladies was brought up, and Victoria sneaked into the studio to Andy's utter amazement, and just watching the clip you can just see it. He is just totally gobsmacked, and it is pretty much love at first sight.
When did you first realize that this was the reason why you watched Dallas? From the very beginning, from the first time you saw her?
From the very first time I saw her, yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. No, I really
I've never missed an episode. Yes. I don't really care who shot JR.
Andy was not only starting a new romance, but also a new career path outside the world of pop music. Andy's drug problems were affecting his voice during recording sessions. With disco waning, his record sales dropping, and his brothers too busy producing other acts, Andy focused on creating a television identity for himself. He was hired to co-host the weekly TV series Solid Gold. The show featured the top Billboard hits of the week and was an ideal vehicle for Andy's talents.
He was just such a good guest. always on the face of it, the kid next door, as it were, sort of good-looking guy, could talk a bit, had a personality. He was the first solo artist to take his first 3 singles to the top of the American charts. That's something that nobody can ever take away from him. Nobody else can say that. Andy was the one that did that.
Andy and Victoria quickly became the it couple of Hollywood, and their relationship received a lot of publicity. To capitalize on their popularity, they teamed up and released a single, All I Have to Do, in August of 1981.
His third album was barely in the top 25 and only on the American chart for 15 weeks. I think he was actually trying to do something that was addressing the market he made with his girlfriend of that time, Victoria Principal, a cover of All I Have to Do Is Dream, which fit in, I thought, with the kind of soft, middle-of-the-road country that was just coming in right after the crash of disco.
Andy's future in show business brightened further when he drew interest from theater producers mounting an LA production of the hit Broadway musical Pirates of Penzance, co-starring Pam Dauber.
When Andy's recording career went into decline, he was obviously looking for working in other areas, and he started getting jobs on stage in musicals. One of the first ones that he did was Gilbert and Sullivan's opera, The Pirates of Penzance. He wasn't really cut out for that. Ultimately, he really needed to have a trained tenor voice to do that, and okay, maybe he could have adapted and lasted the full course, but it didn't work out for him and he started missing performances there.
He felt very insecure about it. Even though he was getting rave reviews, he seemed to lack the confidence in himself.
As Andy juggled the pressures of starring on stage, being in a hit TV show, and maintaining a high-profile romance, he continued to abuse drugs. Like Andy Gibb's first wife, Kim Reeder, Victoria Principal finally gave Andy an ultimatum: choose her or choose drugs. Andy may have wanted to be with Victoria, but eventually the drugs won out. The couple broke up in March 1982.
What hurt me was that she didn't seem to go through any pain at all. And I felt a bit strange being the man feeling the pain and the weakness. And it really was hell for me. It really was. I had a nervous breakdown.
You've had a long-standing battle with drugs. You're doing okay now, but tell us a little bit about that.
You know, it was, a few people in the business knew about it for quite a few years, and I tried to keep it secret. I was with cocaine. And it got to the point where, I mean, my family, of course, for many years have been very, very concerned, because it got to the point of danger.
The breakup of Andy and Victoria became fodder for the tabloids and talk shows.
Their relationship was so public and so scrutinized and so talked about. And when they were dating, it was fine, but when the split happened, it was really painful for him to have to go through that in the media.
Andy went on The Tonight Show with Joan Rivers, hoping to talk about his career, but was forced to discuss Victoria instead.
How did you know when you were breaking up?
Well, we just started to argue an awful lot at the end.
It's awful.
I don't want to talk about all this. Come on.
But then you went to, and I don't want to discuss it anymore either.
I was pretty bad for quite a while. I was very, very depressed, and I missed her for quite a while, of course.
Yeah, because you're in love.
That's right, and obviously at the end it wasn't mutual.
Things were spiraling downhill for Andy. In March 1982, his contract with RSO was not renewed based on poor record sales. He was also let go from Pirates of Penzance and Solid Gold because of his recurring absences. Andy's career and personal life hit rock bottom. No one knew if he'd be able to bounce back. By the early 1980s, Andy Gibb was fighting to get his career and personal life back on track. He had been fired from TV's Solid Gold and the musical Pirates of Penzance because of multiple missed appearances. Andy spoke publicly about his setbacks with the hopes of reviving his career and reputation.
We split up several times before the final split up. And it was inevitable. It had to happen. And I suppose I thought so much of the girl, and I still do. I just fell apart. I just don't quite know the main ingredient that made me fall so completely apart. But I want to tell the story now. I turned to drugs for a month. I did quite an awful lot of cocaine, which I no longer do. And I think it's very important for my fans who have been with me since I started in the business at 18 to know exactly what has happened to me, to know that they should not do this to themselves. I think that's very vital.
Still, Andy's solid gold appearances caught the eye of agent Jeff Widges, who felt Andy still had star appeal.
I got to know Andy very well, and I adored him. He was very charismatic, very talented. And when I set my mind that I wanted to represent him, that's all I focused on, was how could I represent Andy Gibb, because he was that charismatic.
Andy and his team wanted to utilize his singing talents and his ability to charm live audiences, so they created a Vegas-style show. They took the show on tour, and Andy found new life performing on stage again.
He played Atlantic City hotels. He played Las Vegas. He played at the Bally's Hotel. He also played internationally. So what we did is we developed a solo act of his and had him tour.
Audiences loved Andy, but that didn't keep his insecurities at bay. If a performance didn't flow without a hitch, Andy was dissatisfied.
I would stand behind the wings and I'd look out at the audience and see how they were reacting, because after the show we would discuss the reactions of the audience. But as soon as this particular show was over, Andy came back and said, "I gave a terrible performance." I said, "Why? I watched everybody." He said, "Did you see that young girl in the second row? She was practically falling asleep." I said, "Andy, there may have been 1,000 people in the audience. Why did you focus on this one person?" He was, in some ways, a perfectionist. He wanted the entire audience to react.
Andy continued to diversify his career by making guest appearances on TV shows. It was during the filming of an episode for Gimme a Break, starring Nell Carter, that Andy would meet a new interest.
Well, when I first found out that Andy was going to come and guest star on our show, the entire week before he came to be on the set, Nell started teasing me about, "Oh, you guys are going to date and you're going to, be an item." And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever. And I really didn't think that much about it. When he first came to work, it was fascinating because he came, and he was very, very sweet. And in a show like we did, you do a reading around the table. And then we all went out to lunch. We used to all go out to lunch together. And it really was an immediate attraction between the two of us. I mean, there was just something there. There was a chemistry there. And all through this lunch, because we sat next to each other, just something clicked. And so really pretty much from the first day, there was this little, sparkle between the two of us.
I just put my jacket on her so she wouldn't catch cold.
Chief, can't you see he's telling you the truth? Look at that face.
I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, Andy.
Listen, why don't you stay and watch us rehearse?
That's very generous of you, son, but I hate your music.
Thank you.
The first actual date that we had, he picked me up and he took me to his mom and dad's house, and we just hung out with his family, his mother and father, and just hung out there watching a movie. And we jumped, into this recliner. They had this big recliner in the family room and snuggled watching a movie and had just the nicest time.
Andy was hesitant to have another relationship play out in the public's eye. He kept his courtship of Kari very private.
He liked the celebrity, but he also liked being a regular guy. But sometimes he had a little bit of trouble being a regular guy because he had that celebrity at a very young age.
There's a reason why there's not a lot of publicity photos of the two of us, is we didn't do the Hollywood parties during that time. And he was going through a difficult time emotionally and mentally at that time too, and I think he felt just safer being at home.
Dating Andy, though, was not without its challenges. He would go weeks without calling.
What he would do is he would call me after this period of separation that we would have, and he would say, I've been having a really rough time. He wouldn't specifically spell it out, but he said, you know, I just didn't want you to see me that way.
You don't want to see someone that you love sort of going downhill sort of because of this kind of addiction and abuse. But what can you do short of tying them down? The ultimate decision to sort themselves out has got to be their own.
Kari loved Andy, but didn't know if their relationship would work because of his drug problem. By April 1985, with his career opportunities dwindling and his finances taking a plunge, Andy decided to get help by checking himself into the Betty Ford Center for treatment of his drug addiction.
I think I finally did have a conversation with his mom where she said that he was in the hospital and that he had made a decision that he was going to check himself into Betty Ford. The doctor felt it was very important for him to be around people who he cared about and that he felt really safe with. And so she said to me, he's asking for you, will you come? And, you know, I mean, there, of course, wasn't a hesitation, you know, in me because I cared for him so much.
Andy's days at Betty Ford were promising to his family and friends. He began playing his guitar again. He was writing songs, and he was hoping to recapture his recording career.
It was an amazing experience to watch because over the course of the weeks that he was there, I watched him come back a little bit more every single week.
There were many reasons Andy wanted to get his life together, but one of the most important was so that he could have a relationship with his daughter, Peta.
I know that Andy's relationship with Peta, or lack of relationship with her, was something that was very, very painful for him. And I know he had a tremendous desire to change that.
Andy left Betty Ford intending to stay drug-free. His family and friends decided to give him space and time to adjust to a life without drugs.
His family even went so far as to move him from the old house that he was in into a new place so that he wouldn't walk back into an environment that had old memories. Unfortunately, you know, he got out and everybody was like, let's give him a little time to get settled, go to his meetings. And within a couple of days, he was already out again. You know, he lost his sobriety.
Andy's relapse proved to be the final straw in his relationship with Kari.
It had been a couple of years now, kind of on and off, with him going in and out of these challenging times in his life. And, you know, I never chased after Andy. I'd always let him, you know, call me, because it's not the way that I am. And I liked him so much, I certainly wasn't going to turn into a crazed groupie. But that last time where he slipped away, something in me kind of knew. I just thought it was over. I didn't talk to him after that. He just literally cut off.
As Andy's life continued to spiral downward, the Gibb family would again try to rescue their wayward son. By the late 1980s, Andy Gibb's world was in complete turmoil. In 1985, he earned just over $24,000, and in 1986, his income dropped all the way down to just under $8,000.
1987, Andy was declared bankrupt with debts of over $1 million and assets of about $50,000. That wasn't good for him, but sort of he was clean at that time. So much so that he actually took flying lessons and actually got his flying license, which he was very, very pleased about.
In 1987, the Gibb family united to help Andy resuscitate his ailing career. During this time, he renewed his close relationship with his brother Barry, playing tennis with him on a regular basis. While the family was pleased to see Andy getting back on track, Barry sensed that something was still amiss. Andy was experiencing shortness of breath and chest pains.
He'd complain about horrendous chest pains, and he'd occasionally go to hospital to get this sorted out. His cardiologist said that Andy wasn't suffering heart attacks in the true sense of the word heart attacks, but he was having some form of attack which was actually killing off small parts of the heart muscle.
Health issues aside, Andy decided to give writing music another try. He recorded 4 original songs with his brothers at their studios in Miami, Florida. During those sessions, Andy began to recapture the spark of his earlier hit albums. It seemed that he was finally rounding back into form.
They used the Bee Gees studio Middle Ear in Miami to record the demos for 4 songs. On the strength of these, Island Records signed him and he came over to Britain in January of 1988. He stayed in the little chancery next to Robin's main residence in Oxfordshire. Something went wrong and he just suddenly became extremely reclusive. He seemed to be drinking, sort of from evidence that we've heard.
Robin took care of him, but he was clean. He hadn't been doing drugs for quite a while, but unfortunately he hadn't been able to kick the booze, and that had weakened his heart.
On March 7th, just 2 days after his 30th birthday, he checked into the John Radcliffe Hospital in England with brutal chest pains. He would never leave the hospital, dying from heart complications on March 10th, 1988.
I unfortunately found out the same way everybody else did, because it was in the media, but ironically, it was the gentleman I was dating at the time called me on the phone and he goes, "Guess what? Andy Gibb died." I mean, I was shocked, as you can imagine.
The media began to broadcast false reports that Andy had died from a drug overdose. In fact, he actually died from myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart.
I think a lot of the family were angry that Andy's death was being portrayed as drug abuse, and it wasn't.
Andy was buried at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Hollywood Hills, California.
It was just all these people that just loved him so much. I just remember like the look on Olivia Newton-John's face, who just adored him. And it's just one of those moments where you think, this isn't right. This is not the way it's supposed to be, because he had so much more life to live, especially for his daughter, especially for her.
Kim, Peter's mother, never made any great claims for money when the divorce went through, but what she has always insisted on is that Peter and her education always be catered for, and to their credit, Barry, Robin and Maurice did ensure that that was taken care of. They also made sure that royalties from the sales of Andy's records were increased slightly, and that she benefits in that way as well. Although those royalties aren't as great as they were.
One mustn't think he was just some dope who let himself go on drugs. So many artists have been through that drug scene, and I know that so well. It was his weak heart was the key, that he couldn't afford the stress of the lifestyle that he had adopted.
The sad thing is that he died from a heart ailment, because Andy really had the biggest heart.
Even though it's been quite a while since Andy has passed away, he's still in many, many people's hearts. As you can see if you do searches on the internet and things like that. He touched so many people when he was here. His sensitivity came across and his passion came across when he was performing. And I think that's what was part of his charm and part of his special talent that he had.
When I think about him, I just get this joy in my heart. I will remember him as one of the most fun, vivacious, loving, sweet, kind individuals that I really have ever met. I mean, just this light, such this wonderful spirit inside of him. And whenever I was with him, he always made me feel so special.